Hey everyone, and welcome to more DnD Horror Story Cringe. In today's episode, we have a tale about a player that doesn't listen to a dungeon master's request, a story about dice hating the players, and much more. So, let's get right into these stories. Don't Bring Them If the Host and GM Says No, by Reddit user OKCharity7922. Back in the before times, I was a GM for a game of the original edition of World of Darkness. At the time this takes place, I had been running weekly for a couple of months, and yes, it was only the second or third game I'd run, but our group had been playing D&D, Shadowrun, and other World of Darkness settings 2 to 3 times per week, them for about a decade, and me for about 5 years. The setting was a parody of the college town I had gone to school in, but with monsters, and the players were college students. That way, if someone couldn't make it one week, their character just had a lot of homework to do, or was in class or something. The cast of characters. That guy, who wasn't even a player, but had a habit of showing up randomly for a few sessions of other games, being an obnoxious git, doing messed up things, and would often tank games, what seemed like for fun. In one particularly memorable instance, he brought a pixie into a D&D game, which had been going on for a while, and started casting sleep on people and having sex with their ears. What? Mage, whose house we usually played at and was our general D&D dungeon master. Q Jin, who was another often game master, and whose World of Darkness books I had borrowed to come up with plot and things. And Art, a Toreador and one of the only non-college students. The main antagonist and protagonist of this horror story are that guy and Mage, and, well, me. We could never really get a game at my house because of things to do with my family, and on this particular day, I was going to cancel the game because I had left the previous night's D&D game early because my dad called and said that something was wrong and I had to take my cat to the emergency vet. And given that my parents had been on their way out of town, I didn't have any backup to watch him and wasn't going to drag him to someone else's house. The guys didn't want to cancel, and Mage called up and suggested that given that my folks were away, that he would bring the guys over to me if that was okay. Being barely out of college, that seemed like a fine idea, except I could hear that guy in the background of the call, and I reminded Mage that he couldn't bring that guy to my house. If we were in the same game, he would never talk to me, even if it was character appropriate, which was no great loss because when we were in non-game social situations, he was an utter misogynist and, of course, his previously mentioned game tanking behavior. I reminded Mage that there was a reason that I hadn't invited that guy to the game in the first place. The situation. About a half hour later, given that our house was in the boonies, everyone showed up. And I'm sure you'll be shocked to find out that that guy was hanging behind Mage on the doorstep, looking pleased with himself. I just give Mage a ball-melting look and remind him quietly and rather tersely that what I had specifically said. Mage was a big pushover at times, and gave me this sob story about how that guy was in a down mood and needed a distraction, like I did, and had come up with a really great character concept, and that the game would be delayed another hour or more if he had to take that guy home now. I was willing to wait or just put the game off entirely, but the other two were on at me to at least listen to the character concept as it was really good, and that guy was really excited to join my game because he'd been hearing all about it on the drive over. I was highly skeptical, but I was being pressured from 4 corners to let him in. The character. He essentially pitches me a character that is like Giles from Buffy, a studious mage who could potentially help the other characters, who are all about our own age. He would be mild-mannered, but experienced with the supernatural as an advisor and mentor type, and could easily be brought in pretty quickly, as the other players had just finished up a mission and needed to do some research to find out more about the plot arc. Against my better judgment, I relented. I reminded that guy that this was a serious game, focused a lot on roleplay, detective mystery, mild horror story, problem solving with less combat than your standard D&D game, and that I would not put up with any bullshit, especially given the jokes he was making while doing character creation, and the peanut gallery commentary as I was wrapping up the section of the story that the other players were on, so that we could get to a point where not Giles could be introduced to the rest of the party. I was very clear that I was going to brook no shenanigans. So far the game had its comedic moments, sure, but the story was definitely not going for pixie ear rape, or him hitting creepily on every female NPC that vaguely looked in his direction. Everything goes wrong, but I keep my word. I begin trying to introduce his character, but he is instantly belligerent, and rather than actually meeting with the group to maintain the course of the story, he storms away from the group and decides he wants to go hunt down some drugs. I remind him of what he had promised and point out that this definitely is not in line with his supposed character concept. Paraphrasing because it's been so long ago, he says, "This is a college town. There have to be drugs somewhere. This is what my character wants. They have stressed him out." Alright, fine. I decided I would follow the thread and see where it goes. And oh, it went. He decides that on his way to find drugs, he's also going to try to find a hooker. Lovely. I tell him, fine, roll. So he tracks down a hooker, not a great one, and has her lead him to some drug dealers. He then decides that given negotiations aren't going well, that he's just going to use magic to steal the drugs. Oh, are you now? Going to use magic in the open in front of people? If you don't know, there are several in-world book rules about what makes it more difficult to succeed at magic, or for reality to essentially bitch slap you, one of which is showing mere mortals magic to their faces. He got killed by the drug dealers and pitched a huge fit. I was unrepentant. I warned him repeatedly. Kyujin and Art seemed to find it pretty hilarious, given that I was not putting up with his bullshit like the other DMs or like Mage did. Mage himself was looking pretty horrified. That guy asked to make a new character, but I told him, nope, you're done. Mage volunteered to take him home, and I was like, please do. But that guy made a big show out of not wanting to ruin anyone else's fun, and said that he would just read or something. He ended up curling up in the corner and going to sleep. TLDR. Friend brings problem player to my game, despite being told that I do not want him there, especially because the game has been moved to my house. Friend guilt trips me into letting him join the game, and problem player promises to be good, but isn't, and reaps the consequences. While that guy was definitely an antagonist in this horror story, the main source of the problems in this story was Mage. OP specifically said that he didn't want that guy at his house, and Mage let that guy strong-arm him into coming along anyways. I know Mage didn't want anyone to be mad at him, but just ended up making the whole situation awkward and making OP angry instead. Honestly, if someone tells you that they don't want a certain person at their house, don't bring them. Let's move on. A toxic problem player with a power fantasy is allowed to co-develop the campaign with a DM that can't say no. My only regret is not leaving sooner. By Reddit user, Useless Teammate. This was one of those cases where the problematic behavior wasn't obvious until a dozen sessions into the campaign, where the true extent of his immaturity revealed itself. This 30-year-old man-child was perfectly fine out of the game, but the way he conducted himself in-game and his contributions behind the DM screen reeked of an incredible lack of self-awareness on his part, with the number of taboos he'd blown past. He used his position as co-writer of the campaign to turn his PC into an anime power fantasy, while the rest of the party were a bunch of standard people just starting out on their journey. His character had a backstory of a level 20 adventurer, despite all of us being level 3. It wasn't obvious at first, but later on, we learned that his PC was apparently the most important person to have ever existed. Within his backstory, he had already lived for 10,000 years, influenced every major historical event in the setting's history, personally met every world leader, humbled the gods themselves, and progressed civilization forward with his technological breakthroughs. I wish I was exaggerating. His first response to the introduction of an NPC or mystery was, "I already know about this," or, "Yup, I encountered something similar a while back," or, "Huh, reminds me of that one time." There was literally nothing under the sun for that character, even when it was an improv line from another party member. His character killed the suspense in every scene he was in because he never took any threat seriously and knew the DM would bend over backwards to enable him. It got real grating real quick. It was also impossible for party members to roleplay with him because he gave us nothing to work with. The character had no personality. It was just a self-insert of the player, and he only ever talked in the form of a humble brag about how cool he was. Every one of his interactions with important NPCs devolved into him referencing some shared history that only he and the DM were privy to. This left the rest of us bored and agitated. You couldn't even ignore him if you tried, because he would always butt into other people's backstories. When my character had to face her own sister on the opposing side of a war for this dramatic showdown, he immediately ruined the moment by belittling the interpersonal drama and taking control of the scene to have it end how he wanted it to. The party was made irrelevant in combat because he created a bunch of overpowered magic items, which he then gave to himself. His character regularly matched the entire party's damage output and could force opponents to make infinite saving throws against paralysis. While we used an online dice roller, he rolled physical dice that happened to never fail, while consistently critting several times in an encounter. After all that, he still had the gall to get mad when a boss kept passing their saves. He was the epitome of bad game etiquette in terms of roleplay and overpowered homebrew, but the DM was blind to all of it because they were friends. I was naive when I read all of those horror stories here and thought that it couldn't possibly happen to me. How can you expect to have a good balance in encounters when you have a party of level 3 characters and then introduce a level 20 character that basically joins them wherever they go? Also, having someone co-DM and be a player is just asking for stuff to go wrong, especially when that player is a narcissist and basically makes the character a self-insert of himself. Of course that character is going to be perfect in every way, know everything, and never get touched in combat. If OP is still in that game, I would just leave, as I can see nothing but frustration coming from it. No D&D is better than D&D with a narcissist that has the DM's ear. And before we get into the last story of the day, here's Nipsey with a very important message.
Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. I really like this toy.
Thanks, Nipsey. I hope they do all those things. Now let's get into it. Not all horror stories are about terrible people. By Reddit user INQ101. This happened in last night's Curse of Strahd game, so spoilers for Curse of Strahd, obviously. The party has just cleared the winery and are trying to recover the stolen magic stone. We tracked it down to the Druid's Hill Shrine and came up with a plan involving invisibility, disguised self, and distractions. While a couple of the party hung out nearby, keeping watch and ready to deal with patrols, the rest of us had snuck into the shrine, and one of the party tries climbing the tree shrine statue thing, while invisible, to grab the magic MacGuffin. This is the point where everything starts going wrong. The first athletics rule succeeds, but the second one is a natural one. The nearby druids who are busy chanting at a ritual are alerted. I, the wizard, realizes that we need a distraction. Something subtle and cunning, versatile enough to draw both the attention of the druids and alert the rest of our party to our predicament. Of course, I cast the most subtle and utilitarian of spells, Fireball. Combat starts, roll initiative. There's 5 of us, and the dice before modifiers were 2, 1, 2, and 4. With modifiers, our highest initiative is an 8. Well, at least this counts as a surprise round, so we might be able to get something done. Our rogue manages to stab one of the gate guards. Our cleric, outside the shrine, but in place to distract one of the outside patrols, tries to guiding bolt, and with a +7 on the attack, gets a 9. Our warlock sniper misses both shots. Our barbarian, halfway back up the tree, leaps down into the middle of the druids, and starts swinging away with her axe. Athletics to jump down without taking damage was a natural 1. But wait, she's raging. Advantage on strength-based checks. She rolls again and gets a 5, but with the bonuses, it was just enough. She makes an attack, and natural 1. Her second attack just hits. This set the scene for almost the entire combat encounter, and at the end of the first round, only a couple of mook enemies were down. At the end of the second, we'd hardly done any more damage while taking several nasty hits. Round 3 saw 2/3 of the advanced team being trapped by entangle spells, while only one more bad guy went down, and the enemy backup was getting very close. Of the 46 D20 rolls made by the players, 9 were natural 1s, 7 more were nat 2s, and 8 were 3s. It seemed like everything we did was doomed to fail. The few hits we did get were slowly whittling down the enemies, but it was slow and exhausting work, both in character and out of character. It really felt like the dice were against us, and if we hadn't planned ahead and prepared, this could easily have been a TPK. We did eventually prevail, and in dramatic fashion, our cleric, who had been in the distraction force, saved the day, kicking in the figurative door and unleashing the righteous wrath of the Morning Lord on the remaining bad guys. So sometimes it isn't about a problem player or difficult DM. Sometimes the dice just hate you. More lighthearted than the other stories here, but I hope it fits, and I hope you all enjoy this tale of our suffering. Also, this all happened on Roll20 and D&D Beyond, so all the rolls were public. Yep, that is just the way things sometimes go in D&D. Sometimes RNGesus loves you, sometimes he doesn't. For example, in my main campaign, our party was hired by a dwarf to be protection on a trip to a haunted island. We get into a BBEG fight, and the dwarf is downed. My rogue has a healer's kit, so I have him try to get to the dwarf to stabilize him, but there's a fence in the way. So the DM has me roll athletics, and it's a natural 1. The BBEG proceeds to kill the dwarf, and after the fight, our cleric tries to revivify him. And can you guess? Natural 1. So this adds a side quest of trying to bring back this dwarf through other means. And weeks later, we have everything we need to bring him back. Each party member is given a chance to bring the DC down from 10 to bring him back, and we all get it down enough that only a natural 1 on the DM's roll would fail. Our DM takes her webcam, points it at her dice tray, and proceeds to roll, you guessed it, a natural 1. Though, that's what makes this game so great. Even when you think you have something set in stone, there's always the chance that it will not go the way you think. Thankfully, in OP's case, they still managed to make it through that encounter. Do you guys have any stories about the dice just seeming to hate you? If so, and would like it to be shared on the channel, be sure to post it to the D&D Doge subreddit, post it in the comments, or even at me on Twitter. As always, I appreciate all of you, and may all of your rolls not be natural 1s. Until next time.